There are so many things beginners struggle with when painting watercolor portraits. If this sounds like you, here is full step-by-step class where I'll share the techniques and tips that I've learned over many years to help make your process more enjoyable and easier. In this real-time tutorial, we will tackle everything: sketching from a reference photo, setting up your materials, mixing skin tones, creating realistic shading, and adding beautiful details. If you're ready to level up your watercolor portraits, grab your tools and let's start painting. Hello everybody! Today we're gonna have a real-time session. I'm going to paint a portrait of one of my followers. Some time ago I asked some of my followers if they wanted to be painted by me, and I created this hashtag #PaintMeJane. For today's session I chose one of the provided reference photos, although so many of them were nice. Mainly I was looking for something with good light and shadow, so I've chosen this one. It has nice light and shadow, very nice skin tones. There is some reds in the face, there is this cast shadow below the chin, so I think this is beautifully shot. The author of this photo is Susan. I'm gonna link her Instagram profile down below, and on the photo it's her daughter, Will Mary. So thank you both of them for providing this reference. I want to go over the materials now that I'm gonna be using for this portrait. If you want to paint along, prepare everything so that you can start without interruptions. So we've got paper, drawing tools, some brushes, and some paints. There's one type of material that you should make sure that you have higher quality. It's your paper. Cotton paper is a bit more durable, usually helps you create better results, gives you better painting experience. I use two types. It's either Archie's or Winsor & Newton professional watercolor paper. Lately for portraits, I've been using this one and this one more for florals. But today it's gonna be Winsor & Newton Professional. This is cold press paper, so it has texture. For drawing, I'll be using mechanical pencil. It has 2B lead in it. This is a Kohinoor, this eraser in a pencil that I use for if I want to clean up the sketch in very tight spots. This helps. It's like a precision eraser. If I want to get rid of a mark completely, then I use this Faber-Castell dust-free eraser, but usually you will see me using the kneaded or kneadable eraser by Faber-Castell a lot. That is to smoothen the sketch and get rid of the excess smudged graphite on the page. So these are the drawing tools. This, by the way, a scalpel. I am using scalpel at the end of the painting process, sometimes to scratch out some highlights. You can use white gouache. I also have this Winsor & Newton designer's gouache, that's opaque white paint. In case that you don't have scalpel or don't know how to use it, you can use this instead. Brushes I will only use four. This one is 1 inch Winsor & Newton synthetic sable brush for background. Then I have two round brushes. This is what I use is series 7 by Winsor & Newton, but you can find something similar. I have numbers 3 and number 7 here, but you can use anything that's a little bit similar. And I have one other brush. This is just very basic, very cheap brush with synthetic bristles that is flat. I'm not gonna be painting with it. I use it to lift pigment off the page. What's left to introduce is palette. Today we're only going to be using 5: cadmium orange, Winsor red, we're gonna use cobalt turquoise, cobalt blue, and bloodstone genuine. You can substitute these colors for any brand that you have. Just look for similar shade. You need 1 red, 1 orange. Cobalt blue is kind of important. Turquoise, as close as you can get to this shade. It's more for styling the portrait than it's not essential for shading the face. And this one is also just for styling the portrait. I've been using this a lot lately, and it has grain. It's a very grainy color. Kind of helps me stylize the portrait and add some texture into it. Then I have a jar with clean water. You're not gonna see it, it's aside. And you should not forget the paper towels. You don't need masking tape if you have a block. I don't really need to stick it to some sort of board, but if you have free sheets of paper, you will need one of these to tape your paper towards any kind of hard surface so that it doesn't buckle. I also keep these like scrap little pieces of watercolor paper aside. They come in handy during process. When you have your tools ready, we can get started. The one last tool that I'm gonna be using is the iPad. This is my reference. On my iPad, I can zoom in and out of the reference. The disadvantage, I guess, it's the glare from the lamp. You can see now. Sometimes I prefer printing the reference, but lately I've been trying to avoid printing too much. Now that we're all set, all the materials have been introduced, we can start sketching. So I always create my sketches freehand. I don't use any grids. When drawing a portrait, you have to decide if you're gonna draw it like this or like this. I decided I want my portrait to be placed here. And since her hair kind of runs towards the right side of the portrait, that allows me to add some splatters, and that's how I want to stylize it. So I would like the portrait to be, yeah, like very gently. I want to sketch so that you see something like this. Here is going to be the portrait. Here's going to be the hair, like that. Now I'm gonna use my iPad. I zoomed the reference to about the exact same size that I want to have here. So for clarity, this size, just like I see it here, will be exactly the same as this size on my page. And that really helps me because now I can measure. I can measure the length with my pencil from the chin to the top of the head. So here is where the chin would be, to the hairline. So the hairline would be here. It's a little bit more work, but we will nail it, I'm sure. So it will be a combination of freehand and some measuring. Now I want to measure from chin to the end of the brows. So this is going to be that line where the brows is gonna end. Now we're gonna measure how wide is the face. Originally I was very far. This is way too far. Like that. Chin to the nose. So here's gonna be the line where nose sits. How wide is the nose? You can measure everything. Bottom of the lip. Here. And the top of the lip. Here you have to notice that where there's middle point of the nose and there's middle point of the mouth, so they have to align. So they have to sort of be on the same line. Maybe how wide the lips are. So like here. From nose, if I pull a line like that and like that, I should find corners of the eyes, and we have to find out how long, how far they are from the top of the nose here. So this is one corner and the other corner of the eye. Okay, with eyes, you can draw this circle or half circle, but you can also focus on drawing these triangles. That sometimes that helps me figure out how large the circles or half circles actually are. So this part and then this part, which is much smaller than what I normally would draw. And here I have the lens. Here we would have the eyebrow. There is some space here between the brow and the hairline. So I do these very basic measurements, how tall and how wide the face is, how far the face features are from one another, and then I just freehand and put everything together. Let's see if that will work. I now use the kneadable eraser to kind of get rid of all the sketch lines, and I'm gonna try to find her face in everything that I've measured. So now I'm going to very precisely observing the reference. I already have info about where everything is placed. I now just need to find what it looks like and refine that shape. Yeah, so I know that the nose will be here. I just need to refine the shape of it. When you're drawing lips, it is best if you focus around the one line that is harshest. Now I'm going to zoom in so that you see. The hardest line is this line in the middle. That is the line that needs to be a little bit more thick, a bit more bold. And then it is this, there's a line that is not so strong, but there's like shadow underneath the bottom lip. Please do not do this, like connect all the lips, because that does not help to bring out the form when we paint. Leave it like that. Middle line, you can suggest this with your pencil with a line that's not so strong, and that's all that you need to paint the lips. This is the eyebrows. I made them a little bit too high at the start. And on the other side as well, just a suggestion because they're not too dark. And we want to slightly suggest this line. Here is not a harsh line. This is more of just a shadow. So let's do a very soft line there. Like that. Here's the ear and the earring. We can include it. You don't have to if you don't want to. You can decide. Artistic license applies. You can do whatever with your own painting. Okay, and now here's the some sort of like line of the clothes. We can be very loose with that. What I'm more interested about is how the hair is going to fall. So there's this direction of the hair here. I can just suggest that it is there. I don't want to do too much hatching, not too much sketching. I just want to know that there's going to be change in color. And here there's these hairs. I kind of need to know where they are because they're light. One more time I'm going to measure the forehead. We're just 1 millimeter. We need to bring it a bit closer here. That is that. Here is another line where the hair attaches to the forehead. That's a hairline. Here's the hairline. I need to measure, yeah, a bit closer. So the hair does not go all that far away from the face. It's more like this. This here the hair, I'm going to leave the sketch very loose. We're going to work more around that with our brush than with our pencil. This is a very basic sketch of this portrait. If you want, you can suggest some of the shadows. I don't usually do that a lot with my pencil, but sometimes I do. Like this drop shadow is basically the shadow that the nose will drop on the face. It's below the nose, and it's something like this. So if you want, you can do this, and I do very light hatching so that I don't forget. Something similar is here below the mouth. We already did that. Something similar is kind of here in the corner of the mouth, a little bit here, but we don't have to do a lot of those. We can do some hatching here also, where I see like very tiny shadows. That is it. Yeah, I think with this kind of sketch we can work, we can start painting, but I always smudge with my hand a lot of the graphite all around the paper. So that's what kneaded eraser is really great at. So just be very gentle so that you don't lose your sketch. But I usually go over my sketch like this. You can still see the sketch, but all of the excess graphite is gone. Yeah. Yeah, maybe I can go back and just make some of these lines a little bit more profound. So I'm gonna show you one technique how to check your sketch if it's any good or similar to the reference photo. I'm gonna snap a photo of my sketch on my phone, and I'm gonna snap a photo just like this of the reference photo. And then I go to the gallery of photos and I just quickly switch between one and the other, and now I see some problems around the eyes. See? Yes, this is a bit too far. Yeah, so I've got some problems with the eyes that I noticed. I'm gonna try to fix that. I'm gonna make it a little bit shorter. Hopefully now it is a little bit more accurate. I think now it's a bit more accurate. And for those of you that will not want to draw this but will still want to join me in painting this portrait, I will have this sketch for you to download in a free and open Patreon post that I will link down below. So look for it, you can download that and then transfer to your watercolor paper and then start painting. We'll now paint first layer of this portrait. First put these 4 paints, squeeze some out of the tubes. Usually I spend so much of this cobalt blue. Oh, when you ask me about brands, like which brands of paint should I buy? For me, it doesn't really matter because artist grade paints like Daniel Smith, Schmincke Horadam or Winsor & Newton, they will provide similar quality watercolor. So sometimes if my local art supply store does not have one brand, I will purchase the other. Sometimes I have Winsor & Newton, sometimes I have Schmincke, depending on what's in the store. I don't really have one brand that I only work with. And Daniel Smith I like for these granulating colors mostly because they have great saturation, they're light fast, and they provide this texture to the watercolor painting, which lately I've been enjoying very much. You will do better if you tilt your drawing board. I use masking tape for it. I place the watercolor pad on top of it, so I have slightly tilted surface. That will lead the excess water downwards towards the bottom of the page, and it prevents creating these watercolor blooms. Please set your table in a way that is comfortable for you. If you're left-handed, it would be probably better for you if you have your tools on the left side. I'm right-handed, so my palette, these paper towels and water and brushes, they're always on the right side. So let's first get acquainted with colors that we will use so that you don't feel so overwhelmed once we start painting. I'm gonna use these 4 colors that I already mentioned, but let's swatch them on a piece of paper. So this is orange, this is cadmium orange. The other one is Winsor red, which is usually not the color that I use, but I wanted to limit the amount of colors, so Winsor red it is. This is something between cadmium red and alizarin crimson, which is more carmine, darker red. We will only use one red, so this is a good primary medium red. I'm gonna use cobalt blue, and these 3 colors are staples for painting portrait. These 3 colors only. And then we have 2 stylization colors. This is cobalt turquoise, And then I have Bloodstone Genuine. Usually I would opt for Payne's Gray, but I wanted something there that's also granulating. Look what this Bloodstone Genuine does when you dilute it in water. It can get very dark in a thicker mixture, but when you dilute it with water, it gives you this interesting grainy texture. So I just want to use that to add some stylization pops to the background. Turquoise is a color that we'll just also use for the shirt and some stylization. So that's not the color that we will do skin tones, but these three are essential colors. So let's figure out how to mix them. Basic skin tone is usually these two colors mixed together plus water. Not everything fits on my table. On my palette, I mix orange, red, and add a lot of water. So you will get something like this. This is like basic skin tone. This is this tone. These are just two paints, but you can have variants depending on how much orange and how much red you will use in that mixture. The same color mixture, but when you use more orange than red, it can be a bit more yellowish. You can find yellowish parts of the face, like here, a little bit here, a little bit here. In the same mixture, when you add a bit more red, so the red is dominant color, you can get skin tone like that. So even you can even use pure Winter red diluted if you need in a mixture, and we will need that around lips, around nose, around eyes, so that red is important. These are very warm skin tones, but as the face turns, because it is not flat, it turns a little bit like that. So as the face turns a little bit here away from the light source here, it gets colder. In your skin tone, you can add a bit of cobalt blue. We do not paint with blue. It is always the skin tone base. But if you add the cobalt into the skin tone's base, you will get something like that. See, something like this. We can even create some sort of green with orange and cobalt. Incorporate this green into the skin tone, and we'll get something like, yeah, something like that. See, here is very good example. Bottom part of the face usually is with incorporating a little bit of this blue into the skin tone mixture. Just remember that there's always part of the face that is a little bit closer to the light. That part is going to contain warmer skin tones, and then as the face turns away from the light, it gets a bit darker, a bit cooler also. See that? And if we manage to reproduce this in how the color is placed, our paper is completely flat now, it is white. If we manage to place those colors just like we see it on the reference, then our portrait will be perceived by the eye of the viewer as something three-dimensional. What about the hair? I would say she's blonde and has some parts that are brown hair. Brown is very easy color to mix. It's essentially you have a little bit of orange, a little bit of red, and if you add a bit of either, if you have Payne's Gray, you can do that, or neutral tint. I'm just gonna use the Bloodstone. So when I add the Bloodstone, here is my brown. If I use a bit more orange, then I get even more orange maybe. Then I get the blonde. I get the blonde hair. So this is with more orange, the mixture with more orange has a bit more, looks a bit more like blonde hair. Then if I add more Bloodstone into the mixture and even more, like it gets very thick with a little bit of red, this is the dark brown, like here. Depending on how thick and depending on how much of each color there is, you will produce very different shades of brown. But brown is not a hard color to mix. You can produce quite a range of it, so I don't buy tubes of brown paint anymore. The turquoise, generally, this is, I would say, a vanity color. This is the color that we use in its pure form. I don't use it in mixes very much. It just looks great and looks best if it's used like this, so we'll just use it to stylize the color combinations and add some pops to our portrait. That is all that we are gonna do with colors. What we just did, I call it a color assessment. I like to figure out every color and how I'm gonna stylize this portrait before I start painting. That way I waste a little bit less paper in case that something goes wrong with my study or my painting. I want to see if the combination that I think are going to work, if they really are going to work. So I mix, match everything. I use these small papers to test everything. Obviously I will wait for it to dry so that I see, because watercolor changes a lot when it dries. The way you perceive it when it's wet, it's gonna be much more faded when it dries. We're ready to start painting now. I clean my palette. By the way, first layer is always the most fun part of my process. I'm gonna mix my skin tone. I'm gonna dilute the color a little bit. On my palette, I want to create a version that is a little bit more yellow and a version of the skin tone that's slightly more red or reddish, like that. The more water you add, the lighter it will be. Let's start applying it. I can start with very light color here and use a lot of water. You should see the paint. When you apply the paint, you should see it running towards and creating these excess pools of paint, like that. You don't have to worry if they, just make sure that they're not too large. You can suck the paint out if it's too much, but I want it wet. Now we'll have a little bit of this cobalt blue here, just a little bit mixing into the skin tone, because as I go to this area between the eyes, the skin gets a little bit more blue or bluish. I can go through the eye here. Here is a bluish part, more bluish part here, and pure skin tone here. This is the light part. With a little bit of that blue, like grayish, I will go through the eye. Please do not leave out the whites of the eye completely white. However, now we're gonna leave out some highlights. So my skin tone, we can continue adding paint, but here there is highlight and here there is highlight. So we have to basically draw this with your brush and leave out some of these highlights on your paper, like that. Here we have to connect the paint. This part of the face, contains bluish color, so you have to incorporate the blue into the skin tone. Here, like that. And want to connect with the skin tone, and here the skin tone starts to be a little bit more red, so we have to place the red here. I guess just a tiny bit here to this cheek area. And I will now only connect this with clean water, because this part is very light. Now this part turns away from the light, contains a bit more blue here. Now let's work a bit more with red. This is diluted red that I want to place around the mouth. And clean water connects everything here, bottom of the lip. And then skin tone here. Now this looks a little bit too rough, so I'm gonna just gently connect, but with just clean water on my brush. This one can stay a bit more sharp. There's the ear that is on the light, so we need to use pure skin tone, not the one with blue. And then here also, this part here again does not contain blue. This contains blue, this does not. So I'll just copy the reference basically. But here at the bottom we have blue, even more blue. We can start going a little bit more crazy with the blue as we connect the face here. Everything connects, by the way. You ignore that line in between. Now I told you that the hair could be orange with a little bit more red. So, and more water. I'm gonna use my brush as if it was dry so that it leaves out the texture, and we can just place some of these strokes here because these hairs are most blonde, they receive a lot of light, they look like yellow is the base color. We will start to add a bit more Bloodstone Genuine to get that nice brown. I still wanted to connect a lot of this paint with the face. In the meantime, this part of the face kind of dried. I'm gonna work with more Bloodstone Genuine. I will add some of the strokes here. This is the hair, the bottom hair that's a lot more dark. Okay, have to put my palette aside at this stage because we're going to experiment now. I would like to use a hairdryer to just dry the face part, just because I want to add background now and I don't want it to run into the face too much. For this next part, I'm gonna put my block down because I'm gonna do more background, more splatters. First, I'm gonna work with orange. That's the first color that I wanted to emphasize because there's orange in the hair. So I'm going to create a large pool of orange paint. Like that. Don't be afraid. At this point, this is gonna get crazy. So I'm going to add a bit of this paint. And I want to connect it with the hair. Cobalt blue. I'm gonna start adding it here and a little bit here. Now I'm gonna start adding the Bloodstone Genuine. It's gonna get crazy. This will be the background around the figure, mostly. Yeah, I really like how this dark color frames everything. And we don't have to frame everything, like we can let it a little bit loose around the top of the head. But I'd like to essentially establish some sort of colorful spot that her portrait would be in the middle of. Now, orange is a color that you can struggle with to get it clean. Sometimes I have to return to the portrait and add some of the fresh orange on top, like that. Turquoise, the same or similar, but it's less problematic, slightly bit more dark. Now it's a really hot mess, but do not worry. Yeah. What we're gonna do now is to get all of these excess pools away from the paper. I used those water pools basically to create the splatters. They will look great, but now we have to get rid of this excess. Now when there's not that much water, it does not spread all that widely like before. It spreads a little bit. Now I can return the painting. Again, have a tilt. Here is some paint that's still moving a little bit. And I will let it dry. This is my first layer. Usually process is as messy as you just saw, but it provides me with very interesting spontaneous color transitions that I try to work with it in the second layer. I just want to emphasize that painting might look very messy to some of you, and this is very normal for the first stage of watercolor. After my first layer dries, it always looks like this. It doesn't even matter if you spot these kind of mistakes. Edge of the watercolor going through the line kind of looks like it's messed up. Some of you might even want to throw away this kind of portrait. In the second layer, we can fix everything. We can do the shading and the portrait will look great. There's a whole lot of techniques that you can use to develop the first layer further. Lifting of the pigment, you can get rid of the harsh edges. If you have good quality paper, you can do so much. People sometimes say that watercolor mistakes cannot be fixed, but it is not actually true. The color is to some degree always going to stain the paper, so the paper is never going to be completely white. But you can do corrections, you can fix so many things. We're gonna go through most essential techniques for fixing this and creating, I'm hoping, a decent level portrait out of this mess that you see. With that, let's start what I call second layer. Sometimes we need more than 2 layers, but we can just call it the detail layer. We're gonna focus on the most crucial parts of the face, do some shading, and then we're going to put everything together and finish the stylization of the portrait. This is not my favorite part, by the way. The splashing color around, that's my favorite part. Now this is going to be a little bit painful for me. I need to grab maybe coffee, sometimes even chocolate, because it is hard, but let's give it a shot. So remember that brush I showed you at the beginning of this video is this one. I don't use the brush to paint with it, but I use it to lift pigment and fix these kind of edges. So if you don't want harsh edge where it does not belong in the middle of the forehead or middle of the chin, then let's learn how to fix these kind of errors. So I'm going to wet this brush. It contains clean water, nothing else. And then I'm going to gently, just very gently rub this edge that I want to get rid of. Gently. I don't want to disrupt the paper fibers very much, but I just want to lift the pigment or lift enough of this pigment in order to clean the edge. Little bit of tone will still be there, so paper will not be completely cleaned, but you see it's not so sharp anymore. After we place some shading on that part of the face, it's going to be invisible, it's going to be fine. Here it doesn't really bother me because the hair is going to be darker in this area. I'm not going to fix these edges, but these we should learn how to smoothen these. So again, the same technique I'm going to do here that I did over there. So I'm just gently gonna rub, and sometimes it helps to just lift that pigment with the tissue. And that is it, I think. That's all the edges that are, maybe this one, that are too sharp. These sharp edges are nice, I can leave that out. Sometimes I want to create some highlights in the hair here in this area, so we can use the flat brush. I'm even going to like do this with my fingers, press it into shape that's a bit sharper, and you can lift the pigment so that it leaves these marks. It looks like a highlighted hair. I'm going to need the number 3 round brush for the shading around the eyes. Here I'm probably going to use my number 7. Before we start the shading process, I want to talk to you about the color that we're going to use to create these shadows. So this color is something between red and blue. The blue, did we use the blue? Yes, we used the blue here already. You know that in shadow things get a little bit cooler in this setting. You can even see, like when you zoom in, you can even see this greenish, bluish type of shadow. I'm going to grab my red. This was a Winsor red and blue cobalt. I'm gonna mix them together, and this mixture is going to be thicker mixture. Let me show you on my palette what I mean. If you can work with fresh color, it's best. A little bit of red and a little bit of blue, and create a mixture. Do not water it down too much. It needs to be a little bit thicker. Something like this. I might even include a little bit of orange just to get the mixture a bit more brownish, because this red tends to produce a little bit more violet results in the mix. So yeah, I'm gonna make a note about it. Just a tiny bit of orange. Essentially, it's as if you were mixing the skin tone with blue, but thicker version of it. Now, we're not always going to use it like this thick. We're going to water it down a little bit. In some areas, we're gonna need to use thicker mixture, and in some areas, we'll water down a little bit more. Like that. Okay, now one thing to notice. There will be shadows that will be a bit more blue and shadows that will be a bit more red. So what do? It's the same color combination, but if you add more blue to the mixture, you're gonna have something like this. And as we add more and more red into the mixture, you will have here even a little bit more orange just to balance it out so that we don't have completely purple shadow. And you're gonna have a color that's more like this. It's not that you are using too many colors in your palette, it's just the two, but balancing the ratio between those two colors, you can get results that are a bit warmer and a bit cooler. So we're gonna look at the reference photo and we will find which shadows are a bit cooler, which are a bit warmer. There's a logic to it, but for now we'll just stick to observing the reference. I usually just stick to what I see. Sometimes I don't see that very well because the photo is not high quality or something. And in that case, I just try to follow some sort of logic around it. I can see here that the shadow is a little bit more reddish. Here is a little bit more bluish. And when you look at the nose, there's shadow here. Here you can see it very well actually. This part of the shadow is a bit more reddish, and as it progresses here, it gets a little bit more cool. See, so this part is more blue, this part over here is a little bit more red. So just observe these slight shifts in your reference and try to paint what you see there. On the neck, again, we have bluish shadows and we have reddish shadows. I think you understand what I mean now, so let's try to recreate this in watercolor. I'm just going to essentially place the color that I see here to my portrait. I'll start with the eyes. So I have the mixture. Usually what I do is that on my palette I mix all of these mixes. Like here is going to be the one that's a bit more blue, in its thicker form. The bluish mixture. I'm gonna balance everything with a little bit more of this orange. Now this one will contain more red, a bit more red, just for balance, just a tiny bit of here. And then here we're gonna have something that's a lot more red. So 1, 2, 3, all three. We can use this thicker mixture or we can dilute it down depending on what we need. But have it prepared like this for the process to be a bit more smooth. So I'm gonna start with the more reddish paint, and I'm gonna apply here, a little bit here, just like I see it on the reference. I think a bit more red here, a little bit more blue here in the corner, and then with like watered down mixture I'm going to connect these. Here as well. A little bit more bluish, watered down, because this shadow is not very harsh. It's very soft. Here as well. I perceive the shadow around the eye here as bluish, here as bluish, and here's just with a little bit more redness. Even, I would even prepare a skin, like basic skin tone aside, like here, because we need it sometimes to connect things. So here I perceive like just like regular skin tone in between. And I place every color next to one another. If you feel like there's too much water, you can lift it with the tip of your brush. And then also kind of important, here with just clean water, you have to gently rub the edge of this shadow and here as well, so that it can dissolve. Here as well. And leave it, don't mess with it. If you need more contrast later, then you can add more contrast later after it dries. Moving here, there's a slight bit of shadow here. Connecting with clean water, I'm just trying to get rid of this edge. And then a bit more bluish type of shadow here. And bluish here. With more water, I connect them. Bit more red here. You have to have tilt. You have to have something underneath your board. Otherwise, the water, it can accumulate at any area that might cause mistakes, mishaps. But if you accidentally have too much water, it always runs down, so it smoothens your wash. Let's do the bottom part of the eyes, and that is a bit more reddish. I'm going to just gently paint like this. Here's just little bits and pieces on my palette, pieces of color. When you all mix it together and add tons of water, you will get some sort of gray. This is for the eye whites. It should be a bit cooler, something like that. And you can paint the whites of the eyes with this. It should not be completely white. Let's go below the eye. We can do that with a pure skin tone here and a bit more red here. Don't forget to leave the space between the eye and the shadow underneath it. A bit more like reddish shadow is what I see on the reference here. Placed a bit more redness here. By the way, these colors, they can feel like very intense when they're wet, but when you dry it, immediately you will see how the color disappears. That is nature of watercolor. It just does not stay the same intensity. It appears different color when it's watered down and fresh water compared to the dry stage. So when you're learning, have one of these by your side and just dry it and see how the color change, and do it often, do it frequently, so that you learn how much the color will change. Now when I dried, what I painted underneath the eyes is almost gone, so we need to do that again. With clean water, I will connect. So that the eyes, they get a little bit more volume here. You can grab cobalt blue and try to paint inside the eyes. Now it is dry, more or less. And I will grab a bit of that Bloodstone Genuine and we'll try to do the iris. I'm continuing to shade around the nose. Now the nose, the shadow that I perceive something like this. And then I want to add clean water, a little bit of the redness around the nose, and a bit more of the redness in this area. It's how I see it. Shadow that connects to the face. So I apply the shadow and I smoothen the edge here. Here with just a skin tone mixture, I'm going to create a bit more depth in the face, or at least that's my intention. A lot of here, what goes on underneath the hair. I'd like to connect this part with the rest of the face. Let's work a little bit with the brush number 7. Same colors always, is just a combination of red and blue. I'm gonna add even a hint of turquoise into the mixture, because that's the part of the face that is a bit more bluish. And I'm going to just rub the edge to blend the colors here and here. I perceive a little bit more of that reddish shadow, but a little bit more like watered down. So in this area, I perceive the shadows are something like this. A bit more water. And a bit more red here. And this part is very diluted. Now you can gently force the excess pigment out here, but you have to do it very gently. And here a little bit more, because when I dried this, I completely I lost the color here in this area. What is with my paper today? Okay, some of the shadings that I noticed here are not so profound. I'm going to try to deepen. I'm going to try to do the lips now, so I'm gonna take my Winsor Red, dilute it. The lips should be painted with Winsor Red diluted, but in corners I'm going to add a little bit more of this blue, this same blue here. Yeah, so it should have a gradient. A bit bluish here, a reddish here. And top lip is always a slightly bit darker than the lower lip. And now clean water. Add in clean water in here as well. And here as well. Because these corners of the mouth, they're not so sharp. Should try to even like slightly, like gently made less sharp these corners as well. Maybe we could try go in with a tiny brush and try to do a bit more around the lips here. Try to get here some of the tone that I see on the photo. And there's that shadow underneath the lips. It's going to appear a little bit bluish. So I'm going to paint it and scatter the edge a little bit with the damp brush. There's a shadow on the chin that's a bit more bluish. I might want to paint and include it. Just fixing the corner. And underneath the chin, there are shadows like here and here that we need to a little bit clean up. This bluish or bluer shadow will go like that. And here. Here we need to add more darkness, but I'm gonna have to add bloodstone genuine into the mixture so that we achieve the depth that we need here. So this is gonna get like that's too much. That's a bit too much, but like, and smoothen. I have to decide if I'm gonna finish the entire face or start fiddling with the hair and the clothes and everything, but it is easier for me to finish the face at the very end when I already know what type of darkness here am I comparing these two. Probably will switch the focus now to not so important parts like the hair and like the rest of the stylization, and then return to the face to give it final touch at the very end. So with hair, you know how to mix your browns. We might take a look at the reference photo. This color is this color already, so that we just have to preserve this. But what we need to paint is these darker parts here, that will be brownish with a little bit of bloodstone genuine. I'm going to mix browns again. This is just a repeat. When I want to paint hair, I want to lightly dry my brush. I have a paper towels on the side always. That helps me release the excess moisture from my brush. So here I want to work with a little bit of this dry brush technique. I'm going to follow the direction just like I see that the hair grows on the reference photo. So this way, here is a bit more of that brown, a little bit lighter color. And I want to do nice long stroke, but lighter paint. And I want to follow how the hair grows, how I see it grow on the reference photo and how I see it fall. Here there's a little bit of shadow. Here. And maybe add a bit more water to dilute this slightly. Okay, on the other side, the hair is a lot more brown. Then on this side, have to cover this side up a little bit with more brown. So I did not do so well. The first layer here was the same color like here, but it should not have been. There's more light on this side. So this side is more orangey, like more light. And this should be brownish. Yeah, and now we can darken. Don't know if we will be able to do this if this is so wet now, but we can try. And if not, we'll dry and finish it later. So here I'm using just pure bloodstone genuine, and I've tried to cut the figure from the background. Okay, here I see a bit more like darkness, darker hair strengths, so I need to add that. Yes, here we have to mostly work with a little bit of this bloodstone, and I'm just painting around the lighter hair strengths. I want to finish this with some pops of black here, near black. Now I'm going to work a bit more with turquoise, mix it in with mixing it with just a bit more of this bloodstone genuine to darken it slightly, and we'll do some folds of the clothes. So here the clothes will be slightly darker. I see some folds here. One thing is definitely still bothering me, and that is not the hair anymore. Like if I was to leave it like this, it would be sufficient amount of information about the hair. But what's bothering me is the shape of the head. Like the head is supposed to be three-dimensional, yet I somehow just achieved flat results. So I think that I need to apply some more paint. Yeah, definitely to this side of the face. I got the greener mixture, and now I'm going to apply. So like that and like that. And this side is going to be slightly more, and a bit more shadow is definitely here, this part. So I guess we helped a little bit. I also have to apply some shading, more shading here and here underneath the hair. That was not quite accurate. This entire process of shading and adding more depth into the portrait takes a bit more time, focus, but the good news is that at this stage you do not really want to stop painting, but you can do this slowly, observe the reference, go back and forth, and find out what level of finish would you be satisfied with. Sometimes I get too perfectionist and work for many hours until the result is very fine, like maybe in this portrait, but even a little bit less detail would give the portrait sometimes more personality. I do not necessarily think that the amount of detail is the best that you can do for a painting. Sometimes best thing that you can do for a painting is just to stop at the right time. Don't forget that the watercolor paper, it can be overworked. I'll try to work a bit more, but not too much. This is one shadow that I wanted a little bit more crisp and just emphasize a bit more contrast. Here's just, I want to add a bit more of this turquoise color. A bit more here. Then let's add some brows. I'm gonna add with small brush, but with a bit of that brown paint. Like on the portrait, on the reference photo, the brows are very soft, like they're not too contrasty, so maybe the color is too strong. And I do it with this kind of brush, a little bit drier brush. I think the paint is a little too strong. Yeah, something like that. I think the color was too strong. Nostrils. I also do not want to do this with paint that is too dark. And we'll add a bit more blue into this shadow where I think it belongs. And now working with slightly darker colors. Bloodstone genuine, I might want to emphasize a couple of like points here. I think I'm quite happy with the hair, the stylization, tonal distribution, more or less. But let's finish the details of the face, because around the eyes I do not have the contrast that I need. So I want to go a little bit deeper. I'll go ahead and do this. Here we need a bit more contrast. And back to like more blue here. Smudge slightly underneath the eye. And the blue in the eye is not great. To go back and deepen it here. And there's just a little bit of redness inside here, and a little bit of the redness here as well. Yeah, we're probably not gonna paint lashes because they are not really visible. We can just like suggest that this is color of the hair. We can just lightly suggest some texture. It's not really that visible. Below here again for the third time, I think, because I kind of failed to do that shading properly before. Of course that we do not have to emphasize on the portrait like dark circles underneath the eyes, but we can create some volume because I think it looks more natural. Let's try to do something similar for the other eye. That one is covered with the hair much more, so we do not see that much of it, but we still see the like the reddish corner of the eye. And I want to add a bit more of that blue here as well. Eyes are very delicate. Usually they're the focal point of the portrait. Don't feel guilty about spending much more time here fixing them so that they look good enough compared to the other parts of the portrait. Like hair, usually I paint within 5 minutes. Not too much, just rough brush strokes, but around eyes sometimes I fiddle with this tiny brush quite a lot. I'm happy with the face now, finally. I think I'm gonna leave the face like this. I'm slightly tempted to add just a little bit of freckles because they're so cute, partially why I chose this reference photo to paint. So just with very light, like skin tone color, I'm going to add a few of those to add some texture. Freckles, they kind of vary in intensity, color, size, so you can do slight variations while drawing these. Now to add final details, we can do some highlights around the eyes, but that's about it. I think I'm just gonna use scalpel for it, and I will only add, I will just scratch a tiny bit of paper here. Like that, and a few beneath the eye, very carefully here, and just a bit here. You can adjust a few. I wanted to scrub some parts of the eyes here to make it slightly lighter because accidentally I placed too much color there. Here, and also in this area. Here also I wanted to have a bit more lightness. Here we can do one more, like this hair string, and another one. Okay, so I think at this point you can call the portrait finished, but also I noticed that I made such a mess in here. Now this would be a bit risky, but sometimes when I'm not too intentional or just I'm a little bit stressed and I just end up with splatters that are not 100% aesthetic. Sometimes I can try to cover some of them up, clean them up a little bit. I'm kind of tempted to do it here. So I might end up with worse result, but might end up with something better, and we will see. So I try to just incorporate it into what we already painted. With clean water, attach it to this. But now it will have a different contour here. And here is the final result. This recent way of painting portraits is, I agree, a little bit extravagant maybe, but I like it and it's just so much fun for me to paint like this. I really enjoy darker background, especially because of the contrast between the darks and the light hair. Recently I also like to incorporate two colors. I use them as my main colors and not to mingle every color into the portrait. So in this case, I let the orange to stand out and the turquoise. Sometimes before the process of creating a portrait, I sketch the portrait to my sketchbook and then I do a watercolor study in my watercolor sketchbook so that I know what the portrait feels like when it's painted, and then I can do revisions of the coloring and the style for the final piece so I don't waste too much paper. And for this portrait I also did a very quick sketch. The only thing that I wanted to show you is that I had to change the coloring because I did not enjoy this combination. I don't really like the cobalt with the orange. There's contrast, but somehow it just does not give me the same feel that I wanted to achieve. This study showed me what I have to do differently in this one. However, this splatter here looks a little bit more clean, so that is something to improve. It is a good idea if you're learning to revisit some reference photos and paint them again after some time. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed the process, what you got out of the process, what was the one thing that resonated with you throughout this entire incredibly long video. I might do this again, so please, if you want your portrait painted or have some interesting reference photos, on Instagram you can use the hashtag paintmejane. You will find more than 150 of these kind of videos on my Patreon. I will see you in the next YouTube video, a bit shorter, hopefully next time. Bye!